So I want you to picture this. It's 1984, right?
Okay, setting the scene. I like it.
Yeah. So a man walks onto a stage, and he is wearing this perfectly tailored, just brilliantly colored suit.
Oh, absolutely iconic.
Right. He stands in front of the microphone, he snaps his fingers, and instantly an associate brings him a giant mirror and a comb.
The classic routine.
Exactly. And he proceeds to just check his reflection perfectly in time with the music, like without missing a single beat of the groove.
Not a single beat. It's
There-
so smooth.
Right. And to the casual observer, or, maybe to someone today who's just scrolling, watching a clip on their phone, that looks like a comedy bit.
Yeah, it looks like a gimmick.
It really does. But beneath that mirror, like beneath the suits and the bravado, was a sonic architecture that was so mathematically flawless, so rigorously engineered, that it fundamentally rewired modern music production.
It's such a striking image, honestly. And it perfectly encapsulates the deception of that whole era.
The deception, how
Yeah.
so?
Well, when you look at an artist who leans so heavily into a visual persona, the immediate assumption is that the music is secondary.
Right. Oh, yeah, like the visuals are making up for something.
Exactly. But the reality with this specific movement is that the visual was merely the invitation. The music itself was an impenetrable fortress of rhythm.
An impenetrable fortress. I love that. And, that is exactly the tension we are tearing apart today on this deep dive.
We have some really incredible material to go through.
We really do. We are looking at some incredibly dense, deeply fascinating notes from a document called the Rotation Report.
A fantastic source, by the way.
Super detailed. Specifically, we're diving into an excerpt titled Legacy and Impact, which dissects the mechanics of lasting artistic legacy through the lens of artists like Morris Day and the Time.
Yeah, we're getting into the Minneapolis sound, the psychology of artist branding, all of it.
All of it. The actual technical production choices that make certain grooves immortal.
The Rotation Report is just a phenomenal piece of analysis
Yeah.
because it completely strips away the mythology.
It doesn't treat the music as magic, right? It treats it as strategy.
Yes, exactly. The author breaks down the deliberate nature of long-term musical relevance. We were talking about the mechanics of branding before the term personal branding even existed in the music industry.
Which is mind-blowing.
It is. We're talking about the synthesis of elite musicianship with accessible humor, and what the report identifies as this delicate, paradoxical balance between extreme polish and raw authenticity.
It really is a blueprint, for understanding why some music just becomes a fleeting retro novelty, while other music becomes foundational code for literally everything that follows.
Absolutely.
And for you listening, whether you're a hardcore music nerd dissecting the mix of your favorite tracks, or maybe you're someone entirely outside the music industry trying to figure out how to build an identity that actually cuts through the noise of the modern world.
This deep dive is for you.
Exactly. This is the blueprint. We are talking about how consistency, deliberate structural choices, and an absolute unyielding commitment to an artistic identity can create a legacy that completely ignores the changing tides of cultural trends.
Which is arguably, it's the most valuable skill a creator can possess right now.
Oh, totally. Because everything changes so fast.
Right. We exist in this hyper-fragmented media landscape. It's governed by algorithms that just demand constant aesthetic shifts.
It's exhausting just thinking about it.
It really is. So to understand how artists from a pre-digital era anchored themselves so firmly that their stylistic DNA is still replicating in modern pop and R&B today,
Yeah.
that goes far beyond just music history. That is a masterclass in enduring design.
Okay, so let's unpack this, because before we can get into the actual engineering of their sound, the frequencies, the syncopation, the branding,
Fun stuff.
the really fun stuff. But first, we have to confront a massive psychological roadblock.
And that roadblock is our own human tendency toward nostalgia.
Nostalgia.
Yeah.
It's huge.
It's huge. And it's perhaps the most dangerous filter through which to view art.
Dangerous. Why dangerous?
Primarily because it feels so good.
Oh, that makes sense. It's comfortable.
Right. And the Rotation Report addresses this immediately. The author points out that placing an artist like Morris Day and the Time into a neat, color-coded box labeled the 80s is a fundamental failure to understand their impact.
So by boxing them in, we're doing them a disservice.
Huge disservice. When we frame their music merely as a nostalgic trigger, we reduce a complex, innovative piece of engineering into a cheap souvenir.
Okay, but I want to push back on that a little bit, though.
Let's go for it.
Because isn't that the entire point of pop music? I mean, we use music as the soundtrack to our lives.
We do, yeah.
Like when I hear that specific snare drum sound, my brain instantly smells the cheap cologne from my middle school dance.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's vivid.
Right, it's a visceral, emotional reaction. Are we really supposed to fight that? Is the report saying nostalgia is bad?
Well, you don't have to fight the emotion itself, but you have to recognize the limitation of that heuristic.
The heuristic. Break that down for me.
So human beings are pattern-matching machines, right? We're constantly inundated with sensory information, so we rely on mental shortcuts to categorize things.
To make sense of the noise.
Exactly. You hear a Lindrum LM1 drum machine, and your brain instantly tags it.
Tagging it as, like, 1980s synth funk,
Boom! File closed, you've categorized it.
and we move on.
Right. But the danger of that shortcut is that it's entirely passive. When you say, oh, that's just what the 80s sounded like,
Yeah.
you are robbing the artists of their agency.
Oh, wow. Robbing their agency? How so?
Because they weren't trying to sound like the 80s. In 1981, they were trying to sound like the future.
Oh, man. That completely flips the perspective.
They were making radical, incredibly disruptive choices in the studio. I mean, they were pioneering completely new ways to blend electronic drum machines with live bass and guitar.
Which was not a thing before them.
It really wasn't. So when you just slap a nostalgia label on it, you stop analyzing the innovation.
You're just coasting on the vibe.
Exactly. You treat them as passengers of their era rather than the architects of it.
Oh, that's a brilliant distinction. Passengers versus architects.
It changes everything.
It does. It's like, okay, imagine walking into a stunning mid-century modern house.
Okay.
You look at the floor-to-ceiling glass, the flat planes, the open floor plan that flows seamlessly right into the backyard.
Beautiful design.
Right. And if you look at that and just shrug and go, oh, it's a cute vintage house, I love the retro vibes,
You're missing the point.
you are completely ignoring the fact that this specific design literally revolutionized modern living. Like, it shattered the concept of the compartmentalized, boxy Victorian home.
That's a great analogy.
But you're missing the structural genius because you're too distracted by the fact that the living room has, like, a shag rug.
That is the exact dynamic at play here, because the open floor plan of that mid-century house still dictates how homes are built today.
Yes. It's not just a museum piece.
It isn't just a relic.
Yeah.
It's an active influence.
Yeah.
And the source text makes this exact argument about the music.
So the music is the architecture.
The foundational architecture of the Minneapolis sound, yeah.
Yeah.
The deep pocket, the synthesizer interplay, the dry production.
All those elements.
All of it is still holding up the structures of modern pop and R&B. If you only listen for the nostalgia, you miss the engineering that makes the house stand up.
Right. So the goal isn't to, like, kill the nostalgia for the listener.
No, not at all.
It's to look past it, to realize that nostalgia is just the wallpaper, but we really need to examine the load-bearing walls.
Precisely. You have to push past the warm, fuzzy feeling of the memory
Yeah.
to recognize the cold, hard, brilliant strategy of the execution.
I love that cold, hard strategy.
And according to the analysis we're working from, the very first pillar of that execution, the first load-bearing wall, to use your metaphor,
Yeah.
is a pioneering, almost militant approach to personal branding.
Okay, let's talk about that branding. Because I look at the landscape today, and personal branding is just a completely exhausted corporate buzzword.
Oh, it's everywhere. It's overused.
It really is. Every new artist sits down with an A&R rep, a social media manager, a creative director, and they workshop their quote-unquote narrative arc.
It's highly manufactured.
Completely manufactured. But what the source is pointing out is that Morris Day and the Time executed a flawless 360-degree brand identity decades before that infrastructure even existed.
They didn't just execute it, they weaponized it.
Weaponized it. That's a strong word.
It is, but it's accurate. To appreciate this from a music industry strategy perspective, we have to define what brand identity actually means in this context.
Right, because it's not just a logo.
No, it doesn't just mean having a recognizable logo or a consistent color palette on your album covers.
What does it mean then?
It means that the audience understands the exact psychological profile of the artist before a single note of music is played.
They know the attitude.
They know the attitude, they know the vocabulary, they know the posture.
Everything is communicated up front.
Think about the aesthetic commitment of Morris Day. The tailored suits, the specific cadence of his speech.
The unapologetic arrogance.
The arrogance that was constantly winking at the audience. Exactly. He
Wow.
wasn't just a musician standing in front of a microphone. He was a fully realized, three-dimensional cinematic character.
But wait, let me play devil's advocate here.
Please do.
You're calling it a 360-degree brand identity. A skeptic could easily look at that and say, oh, it was just a gimmick.
Sure, I can see that.
Like, it was a funny shtick to stand out in a crowded market. How is this different from, say, a one-hit wonder who just wears a funny hat?
The difference is consistency and musical integration.
Musical integration,
A
sure.
gimmick is superficial.
Hmm.
It's a costume you put on to distract from the fact that the art itself is lacking,
So it's a cover-up.
basically. But a brand identity, in the way the rotation report uses the term, is an organic extension of the music itself.
They inform each other.
Exactly. The swagger of the visual persona was directly mapped to the swagger of the bass line. You couldn't separate the suit from the syncopation.
Oh, man. I love that. The suit and the syncopation.
Furthermore, maintaining a gimmick is exhausting. People get tired of it, the artist gets tired of
But
it.
Joe gets old.
But Morris Day and the Time maintained this hyper-specific persona with absolute unwavering discipline. They didn't break character.
That discipline is fascinating to me because today we see artists shape-shifting constantly.
Constantly, it's the norm now.
Like a pop star will have their dark and moody era, right?
Yeah.
And then next year they launch their country acoustic era.
And then it's their hyper-pop era,
Exactly. They are constantly chasing whatever aesthetic is trending on TikTok.
which, according to the source material, is a fundamental misunderstanding of legacy.
Really?
Yes, chasing trends is a great way to stay relevant for 6 months, but it destroys long-term brand loyalty.
Because the audience gets whiplash.
Exactly. When an artist completely commits to a singular style and personality, they create a reliable expectation.
The audience knows exactly what they are going to get.
That reliability breeds trust, and trust is the cornerstone of a lasting legacy.
To promise to the fan.
The rotation report highlights this specifically. Their branding worked because it wasn't a boardroom strategy. It was an absolute, unapologetic commitment to a frequency.
They own it entirely.
They didn't ask the culture what it wanted. They forced the culture to adjust to them.
That is a massive distinction for new music fans to understand. Like, the difference between a fleeting viral aesthetic and a deeply rooted artistic identity.
There's the difference between mimicking and being.
A viral aesthetic asks, what can I mimic? But a rooted identity asks, who am I?
Perfectly said.
But, and this is a massive but.
Okay.
You can have the best suits in the world, right?
Yeah.
You can have the coolest walk, the best catchphrases, the ultimate mirror routine.
Right.
If the underlying product, the music itself, is weak, you don't become a legacy, you become a mascot.
Absolutely. The visual persona is just the front door. If the house inside is empty, the audience leaves.
They might take a picture at the door, but they won't stay.
Right. Which brings us to the core of the report's analysis, the actual architecture of the sound.
Let's get into the engineering.
The document outlines two main pillars of their musical construction, and the first is an incredibly rare, highly volatile blend.
What's the blend?
Humor and elite musicianship.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Blending humor and music is like, it's like trying to defuse a bomb while juggling. It almost never works.
It's incredibly risky.
When artists try to be funny, the music almost inevitably devolves into a novelty act, like it becomes a joke song.
Right.
I mean, Weird Al Yankovic is a genius, obviously, but he's in a completely different category. Usually, humor actively undermines the musical integrity.
Because humor usually relies on breaking the tension, while groove relies on maintaining it.
Oh, breaking the tension versus maintaining it. That makes so much sense.
The source text makes a fascinating observation here. It states that with the time, the humor doesn't feel like an added layer. It feels foundational.
Foundational. How do they achieve that?
The only reason that is possible is because of the staggering caliber of the musicianship. We are talking about musicians who were essentially virtuosos in their respective pockets.
Okay, let's break down that word pocket for a second, because we use it a lot, but I want to make sure the mechanics are really clear for you listening.
Good idea. It's a crucial concept.
We're talking about the exact micro timing of how the instruments lock together, right?
Yes. The pocket is the rhythmic sweet spot. It's not just playing on the beat like a metronome.
Right.
It's the slight human deviations, playing infinitesimally behind or ahead of the snare drum, for instance.
Which creates that push and pull.
Exactly. That push and pull is what creates a physical sensation of groove. The musicians in this rotation had a pocket so deep, so mathematically precise yet profoundly human that the instrumental tracks alone could stand as masterclasses in funk.
So how does the humor interact with that insane level of musicianship?
Because the musical foundation is absolutely bulletproof, the humor doesn't have to carry the weight of the song's entertainment value.
The music is doing the heavy lifting.
Right. The humor acts as an invitation. When Morris Day is ad-libbing or bantering with the band or checking his mirror,
He's disarming the listener,
he's saying, look, we don't take ourselves too seriously. We're just here to have a good time.
but secretly,
Secretly, while you are smiling at the joke, your central nervous system is being hijacked by a ruthlessly complex bass line and a syncopated drum pattern.
it's a Trojan horse.
It absolutely is.
The humor is the wooden horse that gets you through the gates. But the elite musicianship is the army hiding inside that actually conquers you.
That is exactly what it is. If the musicianship were even 5% less rigorous, the humor would overpower it.
And the band would become a parody.
Exactly. But because the groove is undeniable, the humor elevates the track instead of sinking it. It creates a sense of joy that is deeply infectious.
Okay, so we have the elite musicianship. That's pillar one.
Right.
But the second pillar of this sonic architecture that the rotation report highlights is where we get into the real engineering, the production choices.
This is where it gets really technical.
The text specifically points to clean arrangements, minimal clutter, and the use of space.
And this is where the influence on modern music becomes glaringly obvious.
So talk to me about space.
Yeah.
What does that mean in a mix?
To understand the concept of space in a mix, we have to look at the era. In the late 70s and early 80s, you had a lot of dense, heavily layered production.
Wall of sound stuff.
Exactly. Disco and rock both loved a wall of sound. Dozens of tracks, lush strings, thick reverbs.
Everyone just piling on instruments.
The amateur impulse in production is always additive. If the track doesn't feel exciting enough, the instinct is to add another synthesizer.
Yeah, another guitar, layer some tambourines.
Right. We call it sonic clutter.
Because empty space on a track feels terrifying to a producer. Like silence feels like a mistake.
It does. It feels empty. But clutter is the enemy of groove.
Why is it the enemy?
Because frequencies mask each other. If you have a keyboard playing in the exact same frequency range as the rhythm guitar, they fight each other for sonic real estate.
And the ear just hears mud.
Exactly. You just hear a blur. What the architects of the Minneapolis Sound realized, and what this report emphasizes, is the power of subtraction.
Subtraction, taking things away.
They embraced minimal clutter.
How does that actually work in practice, like on the mixing board, when you're sitting in the studio?
It means making ruthless decisions about what is truly essential. If you listen to these tracks, the arrangements are incredibly clean.
Super sparse.
The lindrum provides a skeletal, punchy rhythm. The bass guitar is carved out so it sits perfectly underneath the kick drum.
They aren't fighting each other.
No. The synthesizers are bright and stabbing. They aren't washed out in reverb.
So they created physical sonic space around every single instrument.
Yes. When a guitar scratches out a rhythm, there is literally nothing else in that frequency band fighting it. It punches right through the speaker.
It's the culinary equivalent of a chef serving you a plate with exactly 4 ingredients on it.
I like that.
You know, like if you go to a mediocre restaurant, they cover the chicken in a heavy, rich cream sauce to hide the fact that the meat is dry.
The sauce is the clutter.
The sauce is the wall of reverb. But a master chef gives you a piece of fish, a squeeze of lemon, a pinch of salt, and a sprig of herb.
Beautiful.
And when you have that much empty space on the palate, there is absolutely nowhere to hide. Every single ingredient must be sourced perfectly, and it must be cooked flawlessly, or the dish is ruined.
I love that analogy because it highlights the vulnerability of space.
Vulnerability, that's a great word for it.
In a dry, uncluttered music mix, you hear every single nuance of the performance. If the bass player drags the tempo by a millisecond, it's blatantly obvious.
Which goes back to why the elite musicianship was so crucial.
Exactly. The production style demanded perfection.
But the space doesn't just expose the musicians, right? It actively manipulates the listener.
Yes, psychologically and physically. In rhythmic music, the silence between the notes is just as important as the notes themselves.
Wait, really? The silence?
Yes. When you have a tight, punchy snare hit, followed by a fraction of a second of dead air before the bass slaps,
Okay.
that microsecond of silence creates anticipation. It creates a vacuum of tension. And the next note releases that tension.
Wow.
That continuous cycle of tension and release is what makes a body want to dance. It is a physical sensation designed entirely through the strategic use of empty space.
That is incredible.
And the rotation report rightly claims that this specific approach to dry spatial mixing continues to dictate how pop, hip-hop, and R&B are produced today. The DNA is identical.
The DNA is identical. That's crazy to think about.
It's all connected.
Okay, so let's pull all of these threads together because we're approaching something that feels like a massive contradiction here.
The central paradox.
Right, because on paper, if you describe an artist who has a rigorously calculated, unchanging visual brand, combined with mathematically precise elite musicianship,
Right.
and tightly controlled, fiercely disciplined, uncluttered production.
That sounds sterile.
It sounds totally sterile. It sounds like an algorithm made it. It sounds like the most robotic, lifeless music imaginable.
In paper, yes.
Yet when you actually put the record on, it feels completely unhinged.
Completely alive.
Yes, it feels spontaneous, alive, like a party that is completely out of control. How on earth do those two realities exist in the same space?
You've just articulated the central thesis of the source material. The report calls it the paradox of lasting relevance.
The paradox of lasting relevance.
Yes, the delicate balance between polish and authenticity. The author writes, everything is refined, but nothing feels artificial.
Everything is structured, but nothing feels restricted.
Exactly.
Structured, but nothing feels restricted. It's poetry, honestly, but it bends the mind.
It goes against what we're taught.
Yeah, because we are taught that structure and freedom are opposites. Like, if you are highly structured, you are confined.
Right.
And if you want to be truly free and authentic, you have to throw away the rules and just be chaotic.
But in art, chaos isn't freedom. It's just noise.
Chaos is just noise.
If you look at any high-level artistic discipline, structure is the exact mechanism that generates true freedom. Let's look at jazz improvisation, for example.
Okay, lay it on me.
A master jazz musician can play the most wild, avant-garde, completely spontaneous solo imaginable.
Right.
But they can only do that because they have internalized the underlying chord structure of the song to a molecular level.
They know exactly where the grid is.
Exactly.
Yes.
Which means they know exactly how far they can step off the grid without the song collapsing.
Ah. So the structure is the safety net.
The structure is the fence around the playground.
The fence around the playground. I love that. Unpack that for me.
Well, if you put a child in a massive open field right next to a busy highway,
Yeah.
they won't play freely. They'll huddle in the center, paralyzed by the lack of boundaries. They don't feel safe.
That makes total sense.
But if you build a strong, high fence around the yard, the child will run wild, completely uninhibited, because they subconsciously trust the perimeter.
Oh, man. Let's map that back to Morris Day and the time. The fence is the immaculate production, the elite musicianship, and the highly defined brand identity.
Exactly, because the band knows that the groove is bulletproof, because they know the sonic space is perfectly carved out.
The front man is safe.
The frontman is relieved of the anxiety of holding the song together. Morris Day can ad-lib, he can interact with the crowd, he can literally stop singing to check his hair in a mirror.
And he knows with absolute certainty that the band will not drop the beat.
Not for a millisecond. The rigorous polish provides the psychological safety required to be utterly, wildly authentic in the moment.
That is profound. And not just for music, but for literally anything. Think about how that applies to your career or your daily life.
It's universally applicable.
When you put in the hours, when you master your craft and build a solid, structured foundation for your work, it doesn't turn you into a robot.
It actually removes your anxiety.
It gives you the profound confidence to inject your true personality into what you do. The structure doesn't restrict you. It supports your authenticity.
And that combination, elite polish supporting raw authenticity, is the holy grail.
Because one without the other just doesn't work, right?
Right. Polish without authenticity becomes dated very quickly. It just sounds like a slick, hollow trend.
Yeah, we've all heard that.
And authenticity without polish usually lacks the structural integrity to survive beyond a niche audience. It falls apart.
But when you fuse them together,
You create something impervious to time.
impervious to time, which is exactly where the author of the rotation report lands their final argument.
It's a powerful conclusion.
They conclude that looking back through this specific catalog of music isn't just about throwing together a retro playlist. It is, and I quote, a statement.
The author justifies that word beautifully. They write that this legacy is about consistency. It's about identity. It's about knowing exactly what something is and committing to it fully.
Because in the context of the music industry,
Which is an industry that is historically desperate constantly incentivizing artists to dilute their identity, to chase the current fad.
To add more sonic clutter just to be louder than the next guy.
Exactly. In that context, planting your flag in the ground is a radical act.
It's an act of defiance, to look at the shifting landscape and say, no, this is the frequency we operate on, this is exactly who we are, and we're going to execute it with flawless precision.
It is absolute defiance. And the reward for that defiance, as the report notes, is transcendence.
Transcendence.
When style, sound, and personality are all aligned, the result isn't just something that works in the moment, it's something that carries forward. It becomes an architectural blueprint for the next generation.
Something that holds its place, even as everything around it changes. I mean, if you ever needed a definition of what a true legacy is, that is it.
It really is.
So let's retrace the steps of this deep dive because we've covered a massive amount of conceptual ground today.
We really went everywhere.
We did. We started by dismantling that psychological roadblock of nostalgia.
The heuristic.
Right. We realized that if we just label this music as a moment in time or an 80s vibe, we are actively blinding ourselves to the foundational, forward-thinking innovations that were happening in the studio.
We had to realize they were architects, not passengers.
Exactly, architects. From there, we examined the extreme discipline of their personal branding.
The 360-degree identity.
We saw how a total, uncompromising commitment to a cinematic identity allowed them to build a profound level of trust and audience expectation.
Functioning as a masterclass in strategy long before the era of modern A&R manufacturing.
Long before TikTok eras. We then lifted the hood to look at the engine block of the music itself. We analyzed the highly volatile blend of humor and music.
And how it only succeeds when supported by an uncompromising deep-pocket musicianship.
That allows the humor to act as a welcoming invitation rather than a novelty distraction, like a Trojan horse.
Yes, we explored the brave engineering of minimal clutter.
The power of subtraction, carving out sonic space to create that physical sensation of tension and release.
And finally, we resolved the ultimate paradox of their enduring relevance.
The fence around the playground.
We unpacked how rigorous structure, immaculate polish, and defined boundaries do not restrict an artist, but rather create the psychological safety net required for true, uninhibited authenticity to thrive.
Which brings us to the ultimate question for you, the listener.
So what?
The so what? Why does dissecting the structural legacy of an artist like Morris Day and The Time matter to you right now, today?
Why should they care?
It matters because it reveals a universal, immutable truth about creating things that actually last. Whether you are mixing a track, building a startup, designing a product, or just trying to figure out how you want to present yourself to the world.
The principles are the same.
When you manage to perfectly align your style, your fundamental sound, and your authentic personality, the result escapes the gravity of the immediate moment.
It doesn't just work for today's algorithm.
It carries forward. It becomes a load-bearing wall that holds its place utterly unbothered, even as the chaotic culture around it constantly changes its mind. That is how you build a legacy.
It is the stark difference between building a flimsy tent that collapses in the next cultural windstorm and building a structural masterpiece that people are still studying and living inside decades later.
Exactly. So I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over as you go about your day. We've spent this entire time talking about how legacy is forged by holding your ground and knowing exactly what your frequency is.
Right.
Take a hard look at the artists, the creators, the brands, or even the leaders that you currently follow and admire.
Really analyze them.
Ask yourself, who among them is constantly shape-shifting, frantically swapping costumes and aesthetics to chase whatever the algorithm demands this week?
And who is different?
And who is brave enough, who is disciplined enough to stand perfectly still, trusting their structured, authentic identity to become tomorrow's legacy?
It's a great question.
Think about it. We'll see you on the next Deep Dive.